Hi guys, welcome back to another video. I hope you guys had a relaxing weekend and that you're ready to conquer this week. I know that I'm terrified because work seems to be running ahead of me and I am barely trying to catch up. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about lanes and we'll continue our series on negotiation and rates. Ready? Let's go! Let's start with how rates change depending on whether you're doing a head haul or a back haul. But first, some definitions. In simple terms, a head haul is when you are transporting a load to its destination. A back haul, on the other hand, is when you use that same route to go back to your original base state. So to make this concept as clear as possible, we're gonna go to the map right there. Okay, so I do understand that the lighting here leaves much to be desired, but I will fix it for future videos. So let's get started. So let's look at some current rates. Right now, a load from Los Angeles, California, going to Seattle, Washington, for a dry van on average pays about $4.62 per mile. This is the average rate to go from LA to Seattle, Washington on a dry van. Now, the average rate to go from Seattle, Washington back to LA for a dry van is $2.20 per mile. So quite a difference. So it's not a surprise that when you read or hear about backhaul, it is often synonymous with bad rate. But this is not actually always the case. Why? Because think of it this way. If you were, instead of being based in California, you were based in Seattle, the head haul would pay $2.20 per mile. So backhaul and head haul is relative depending on where you are based.
So basically, no matter where you're based out of, you are doomed one way or another.
So this is a really good question. Are you doomed to get bad rates one way or another? And the answer is no, and I'm going to show you why. Now, if you're working on the spot market, you can bypass those bad rates. If you're working on dedicated lanes, then it's a little bit more difficult. But let me show you what I do. Now, let's say I book a load from Los Angeles, California, going to Seattle, Washington. Now, this lane pays very well. And then I want to bring back the owner, operator, or driver back to California. What do? I know that going back will pay $2.20 per mile, just about. So instead, I start zigzagging. I know that Washington pays very well to go to Salt Lake City, Utah. So I grab a load to Salt Lake City, Utah. From Utah, it pays very well to go to Reno, Nevada. From Reno, Nevada, it pays awesome to go to Phoenix, Arizona. And from Phoenix, Arizona, it pays very well to go back to Los Angeles, California. So basically, instead of just booking a load straight back to California, I zigzag the truck around where the final destination will be in California, but passing through several different states on the way.
What about company drivers that you employ that are scheduled for their home time? They can't zigzag around and waste time.
Yes, that is true. When you hire someone, it is your responsibility to ensure that that driver comes home for their scheduled time off on time. So, zigzagging around does not necessarily work. Instead, it becomes a game of averages. So let's say you hire a driver who lives in Phoenix, Arizona, and currently he is in Seattle, Washington. It is currently Monday, and on Friday, he has to be in Phoenix, Arizona. So I could easily take him from Washington down to Utah, which is a 2-day load. So now it is Wednesday. Then from Utah to Reno, Nevada, which is a 1-day load. So it's Thursday now. From Reno, Nevada, somewhere to San Diego, California, which is a 1-day load. This is Friday. And from San Diego, California to Phoenix, Arizona, which will most likely deliver on Monday, right? But that doesn't work because now this guy was supposed to be home on Friday and he ends up delivering this load on Monday. So I just ruined his whole home time. Doesn't work. So instead, what you do, you take the driver from Washington to Salt Lake City, Utah. which delivers on Wednesday. It's a 2-day load. If he picks up on Monday, he will deliver Wednesday and get a lot of money for this load. And Washington to Utah usually pays very well. Then from Utah, you take him to Arizona, which is another 2-day load. So it will deliver by Friday. But it will pay much less because the Utah to Arizona loads do not pay as well right now. And then just average out the total rate you made versus the total miles driven and make sure that it's worth it. So you have to do a little bit of pre-planning. You get a lot of money on the first load, not so much on the second load. Hopefully it averages out to get you a good rate per mile. And the driver is home by Friday and is ready to take his rest, so everyone wins. Now, I know some of you are wondering what happens if the market is really bad. To that, I'm going to say that trust that you build with your team and your drivers is much more important than that load rate. You know you're going to make that money back later on when he starts working again, but you don't want to lose this driver's trust. Get them home when they're supposed to be home. Anyway, let's continue with lanes. So we all know the basic principle of economics, or one of the basic principles, is supply and demand. In the trucking industry, there's a huge demand for trucks right now from brokers because there's a ton of freight that needs to be moved. On the other hand, the supply of trucks is limited. So what happens? The rates start going up. And this principle also applies to carrier behaviors. If a carrier is not willing to transport a certain load, the rate for that load starts going up. Now let's look at some examples and we'll start with weather. In the wintertime, states like Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, North Dakota, and Nebraska are pretty unpopular among carriers to deliver to. Carriers don't want to deliver in one of these states. So what happens? The inbound rates for these states are pretty high. And when I say inbound rates, I mean what do brokers pay to deliver in one of these states? So you will see that rates to Montana, Wyoming, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota in the wintertime are very high. This is because carriers do not want to go to these crazy weather, winter storm, freezing rain, black ice states in the wintertime. It's dangerous and it's unpleasant. Now let's talk about density. So, for example, New York City right here, Philadelphia, downtown Los Angeles, Chicago, Illinois, these places are all extremely dense, which means that semi-trucks have a very hard time maneuvering through those cities. Now, you probably already know about New York. This is the worst place for semi-trucks. It's hard enough to maneuver a vehicle that is a small vehicle, a regular car in New York City. Can you imagine what it's like doing that in a huge semi-truck? So what happens? Carriers do not want to go to these dense cities because it's very easy to get stuck there or to break some kind of law or to snag a car that's parked on the street. So carriers don't want to go there. So we're going to use New York as an example. And what you will see is rates to New York City. I'm not talking about the state of New York. Rates to New York City are always going to be extremely high, no matter where you are. If there is a load going to New York City, it's going to pay above average rates. Then there's the question of shortage. So states like Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Nebraska sometimes, and of course Florida have a shortage of loads, and this is historically speaking. So a carrier delivering in Billings, Montana will have a very hard time finding a load out of Billings, Montana to deliver somewhere else. So what will happen is this carrier will have two choices. Choice number one, grab any load for any rate to get out of Billings, Montana, where there are very limited loads. Choice number two is deadhead the heck out of there somewhere where there are more loads. Now, brokers, of course, know that places like Montana, Wyoming, Florida, Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota, they don't have enough loads coming out. So that's why brokers will pay higher to deliver in any of these states right here. So the question is, what do you do when it comes to negotiation? Do you just avoid states like Montana, Wyoming, all of these states, Maine sometimes, New York City, Colorado because of the winter? Do you avoid those states? The answer is no. You will not make money that way. You cannot avoid those states. After all, without risk, there is no money to be made, but the risk has to be calculated. Now, going to Denver, Colorado through all of these passes when there is a winter storm is bad no matter how you slice it. It's a bad idea. However, if you're passing up a load going to Florida for $3 per mile because you are afraid that you will not get out of Florida, that is just as silly as going to Denver, Colorado in a snowstorm. So let me show you an example of what I do. Let's say you're currently in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and there is a load delivering in 2 days to Gainesville, Florida, right here. The total distance with deadhead is 970 miles. And the rate here is $3,700. So in 2 days, you make $1,850 per day, which is awesome. And that is $3.81 per mile. Now, the reason it pays so high is because out of Gainesville, Florida, there are no loads at all. Absolutely nothing. Let's say there are 0 loads. So if your first instinct is, let's skip this load and move on, then keep listening. Yes, there are absolutely no loads and no chance of you booking any load from Gainesville, Florida. But guess what? There is the beautiful state of Georgia right next door, and specifically Savannah, Georgia, where there are a ton of loads in Savannah, Georgia. That's 210 miles away. So what do you do in this case? Well, you grab your calculator. The load you're thinking about booking to Florida pays $3,700, right? For 970 miles with deadhead from wherever you are in Pennsylvania to go to Allentown. What you have to do is then add those 210 miles of deadhead you will have to do from Gainesville, Florida to Savannah, Georgia. So now this is 1,180 miles. So you are actually getting paid $3,700 for 1,180 miles. So what is the rate per mile? $3,700, 1,180 miles. It is $3.14 per mile for all of that deadhead, and you know you're gonna get an awesome load out of Georgia. So it works out. And this is what I do all the time. I will often book a load from somewhere like Seattle, Washington, or maybe Los Angeles, California, going to Denver, Colorado. And I will ask for such a huge rate because I know we're going to deadhead out of Denver, Colorado to somewhere here in Echo, Utah, which is about 450 some miles. The reason is because Denver, Colorado has limited loads and the rates are not great, and they all go to the Midwest. I like to stay on the West Coast. So basically, I include the deadhead miles in my calculations before I even book the load, and that will give me an idea of what kind of rate I want to charge. And usually what I do, it's about 1,000 some miles to go from Los Angeles to Denver, Colorado. And I usually charge something like $6,000 for it for 2 days. So that's $3,000 a day. So it all works out. So I hope you guys found this video helpful. I know it's a little bit of a different setup, so I really hope you guys can see everything I wrote on this map. And I will see you guys in the next video.